Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
Everybody look at your hands.
This is Fire Chief Scott Burnett of the Asheville Fire Department, and you are listening to the SA Matters radio show with Dr. Rich Gasaway. The SA Matters mission is simple. They want to help us see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes.
Hello, and welcome to episode 47 of the Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gasaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. The SA Matters mission is simple: to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where I'm giving a presentation on situational awareness for wildland fire managers who work for the Idaho Department of Lands. Today's interview is the second part of a two-part interview. It was a rare opportunity for me to have this guest, and I surely didn't want to cut the conversation short. So if you haven't checked out part one, go back and listen to last week's episode, number 46. I'm very excited to have back Fire Chief Bobby Halton, the editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering Magazine and the education director of FDIC International. Chief Halton began his career as a structural firefighter in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He left that position in 2004 to join the Coppell, Texas Fire Department as the fire chief. He then left that position to assume the duties at Fire Engineering. He's a graduate of the University of New Mexico. He served on the National Fire Protection Association technical committees and is active in the National Fallen Firefighters Life Safety Initiatives. In part one of the interview, we talked about the FDIC International 2015 coming up and all the exciting learning and networking opportunities that you'll have there. If you haven't yet, go give that episode a listen, and you'll quickly see why the FDIC is the premier fire service education conference in the world. During part one, Chief Halton shared with me that the FDIC was the largest educational conference of its kind in the world as far as attendance and the number of course offerings. There are 280 hands-on training session instructors who will deliver 21 classes on Monday and Tuesday, and 211 course offerings on Wednesday and Thursday. And that's only the beginning of what you're going to see that FDIC International has to offer. In addition to the conference, we discussed what Chief Halton sees in the fire service that's encouraging him about firefighter safety. In this episode, Chief Halton shares what he sees in the fire service that's causing him concern, and we'll conclude with him sharing 3 things that are on his firefighter safety wish list. I want to apologize to the listeners and to Chief Halton for having some audio issues with Skype during this interview, and where I could, I edited the audio to reduce that annoyance. So let's get plugged in with part 2 with our interview with Fire Engineering Editor-in-Chief and FDIC International Education Director, Chief Bobby Halton. What are you seeing out there that's causing you concerns?
The exact opposite of what we just talked about. The people who are still using the Alinsky tactics, the people who still think it's okay to win at all costs, the people who, and I've seen it where, look at the current, stuff that's coming out of UL and, the transitional attack stuff, and the people who say, well, if you don't believe it, you're a denier. No, I have to tell you that I think that I honestly believe that President Jefferson said it best, and President Jefferson once said, and I'll probably get it slightly wrong, so bear with me, but he said, question boldly even the existence of a God, because if there be one, he must approve of the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear. And what our good president meant was that we should question everything, regardless of who says it. I don't care if it's Dan Majkowski or if it's Steve Kerber, because if you look back at this original science, there was a position that was written by some good friends of mine that said you can't push fire, and it was published. Well, we've retracted that now to where you can't push fire with water, but you certainly can push fire with a hose stream that's enchaining air. And so, you need to question boldly. You and I were talking earlier about the fact that, PPA came out back in the 70s, and PPV and PPA. Some folks embraced it, some folks didn't, and it's been modified and adjusted throughout time. But had it been widespread, to call somebody a denier, which is what they do with the global warming deal, hell, it's what Che Guevara did when he was murdering thousands of people and shutting down all the newspapers because he was a totalitarian communist murderer. And I always laugh when I see these moron hippie kids with the Che Guevara shirts. I'm like, really? Do you know who that guy was? He would have cut your head off in a New York minute, you dope.
Yeah.
But anyway, they wouldn't allow people to question anything. That's totalitarianism. That's the complete antithesis of what we've sworn to die to protect. And so that worries me when I see people calling people names like the Kool-Aid drinkers on the other side. When they say these people are buying into this science without questioning it. No, they're not. The good firefighters that I see out there, and this is 99% of them, Richie, in my opinion, and you travel as much as, or more than I do. God bless you. I think you live in the airport. But the 99% of the firefighters out there understand both points of view. And we need to look at history and tradition, and we need to look at science and technology. And it's the intelligent blending of both of those, experience and research, that gives you a more grounded position. And it doesn't mean that your position over time can't evolve and change and morph, and it will. I mean, Dan said it, we really don't know how water works yet, really. I mean, we're just starting to look at hose streams. So, and God bless us, and we'll be, and 20 years from now, we'll still be looking at them, and that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. You don't do one set of experiments, walk away, and say that's it. You keep going and going and going and going and going. The great example, there's a wonderful guy, his name's James Glick, and I love his writings. I don't understand much of it, but my son, who's a physicist, helps me muddle through it. But James Glick is a brilliant guy, and he once said that we work on what are called critical natural boundaries. And what a critical natural boundary is, it's like space or underwater or during a fire. And what nature's doing there is nature's always trying to get back into balance, right? Trying to get things down to their smallest possible components. Just like areas of high pressure trying to get to low pressure to diffuse, right? So that's what nature does. So anyway, he said, when you're working on those boundaries, like around a fire, he said, strange stuff happens at the boundaries. And a great example was the double backdraft that happened at the Tulsa fire at that school about 3 or 4 years ago, where they had a double backdraft. No warning signs, no nothing. All the windows were taken out, yet there was enough gas in the floor and enough gas in the void space to cause the subfloor to backdraft, and then cause the roof area to backdraft. No one had ever seen one caught on video before, and there's some debate between the fire behavior scientists like Steve Kerber and Jamie Lord about exactly what might have made make that happen. But that's a good thing. And they don't call each other names, and they don't debase one another. They just say, well, I kind of see where Jamie's coming from. I kind of see where Steve's coming from, but this is what I think, and this is what he thinks. And that's a good thing. The opposite, when you start calling people names, or you start holding your ideology as a religion, that's a problem.
Yeah, and one of the, I am encouraged by the studies that are being done, but the findings of one study doesn't constitute hard science. It's just the finding of one study. It takes a series of studies with replication, with changing constants to get to where you can say, now it's science. Now it's law.
Well,
and we're far from there.
The science is never settled. That's why someone's not a scientist when like our dear president, when he comes out and says the science is settled on climate change. No, sir, it's not. That's why it's called science.
Right.
It's not called solved. It's called science. It's why doctors practice medicine instead of do it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What would you say your three safety oriented things are on a wish list?
Well, I'd like to see more work done on integrated community risk reduction. That would be number one, because that would save more lives than anything else. And when we talk about integrated community risk reduction, I truly mean integrated. I mean, I'm not just talking about fire codes, and I'm not just talking about sprinklers, and I'm not just talking about smoke detectors and stop, drop, rock and roll. I mean everything from how we educate folks, from how we respond with our partners in law enforcement and public utilities, to how we build things, to how we train folks, to how we think about fire and firefighting, to how we think about traffic and traffic calming, to how we think about just our interface with technology. So my number one thing would be to see community risk reduction become more prominent in what we do, and clearly as we start to wrap our hands around this whole medical issue in the country today, and not to get political about it, I don't care if you support Obamacare or don't support Obamacare, I don't really care, but we're going to get more involved with community medicine. We just are, because we can and we should. If not us, who? If not now, when? That old line. So I'd like to see us get more involved there. But even at that level, if we could help save lives there by teaching kids to wear helmets, by helping them cross busy streets, by doing traffic calming in neighborhoods, more use of circles and less stoplights, all of it. Second, on the fire ground, when it comes to actual structural firefighting, if there's one thing that I would push, would be just greater aerobic conditioning. And just the aerobic conditioning. I think sometimes we get focused on things like heart attacks, but Jim Fixx, who was one of the greatest runners of all time, died of a heart attack. It's the total body. So my second wish would be just greater aerobic conditioning for all of us across the board that participate in firefighting, because I think that's the one area of health that we all can get better at continuously and maintain continuously, and it also helps your mental process. The aerobic conditioning is great for your mental acuity as well. So I would hope that aerobic conditioning would become more accepted. We do a great job, and the young guys, God bless them, they're all hairless and got body waxed, and they look great. But if all you can give me is 4 minutes on the fire ground and then you're spent, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So aerobic conditioning. And then finally, in terms of safety immediately, I think I would like to see safety differently. In other words, I think I'd like us to shift to the new factors for a new era, and the human factors for a new era. I'd like to see us shift away from the old 17th century stuff, from the Maslow stuff, from the Chappelle and Wegman, the silly chain theory stuff and the Swiss cheese gibberish, and really move towards the sense making, and really move towards the new view, which is the local rationality principle and things like that, so that real learning could occur. Because I think we're hung up on trying to quantify and qualify, and safety isn't something that you can count. In other words, if you go to a factory and it says 850 days without an accident, and this is day 851 and the fire department's called because a forklift flipped over on somebody, well, the 850 days without an accident mean nothing. And the one accident really means nothing in terms of a numeric value. Safety is about an attitude, a mindset. It's not about counting. It's not about errors. I'd like to see us move away from trying to explain failure with failure. I'd like to see us move towards trying to understand why people made the decisions they made at the time and why those decisions made sense to them. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Sidney Dekker. He's a brilliant man and a great mentor and just a lovely human being. and I've followed his work for the last 15 years, and I try to read everything he writes. He was actually Steve Kerber's PhD, whatever you want to call it. He was working on Steve's PhD with him. Mm-hmm. So neat guy. I'd like to see us move. That would be my third wish. That's what I think. It's kind of weird, huh? Sorry.
No, not weird to me, because that's the third part is more what I'm focused on and the things that I'm doing with my life now than anything else. And when you talked about how to make sense out of the decisions, I spent a lot of my time trying to figure that out, making sense out of decisions.
Yeah, and the problem is that most of the stuff that we have, if you read our NIOSH, our reports and stuff like that, they're all written from an omnipotent third-person view, knowing the final outcome. So they look at everything that led up to it as causal, which is ridiculous. It's nonsense. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't match the way the real world works in the first place. And the other problem is that people, they all have this empiricist view. In other words, they all think that the mind is a perfect mirror of reality. And it's not. It's anything but, because we're all shaped by our experiences, and all of our experiences are so unique to us that we all see the world just a little bit differently. And that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing. But there are people out there who think that the mind is a perfect mirror of the world. And it's not. And it never will be. I don't care how many simulations you do. I don't care how much training you do. Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, talks a great deal, brilliant guy, and he talks a great deal about type 1 and type 2 thought. And he talks about Gary Klein's RPD stuff as the type 1, kind of that recognition pattern stuff. But that's even flawed, because if your patterns have, you could have a pattern that has a flawed outcome, or not flawed, but an outcome that's not going to be consistent with the outcome you're going to get this time, with no change in most of the variables, except some slight change that you could never recognize. And then he also talks about the fact that that's not the only cognition tool that we use on the fire ground. We use higher reasoning as well. And if you read the stuff by Antonio Damasio, the synaptic brain, the human self, and the stuff that he's written, or I can't remember, some Swedish guy, Dorenkal, the guy who wrote The Overflowing Brain. You can only handle so many variables, you can only make so many decisions, and then you're done. You hit decision fatigue. And under stress and pressure, decision fatigue is about 3 or 4 decisions. Without pressure, it's a bit more. But, we've all had it at the end of the day when you go home and your spouse, your husband, your wife says to you, "What do you want for dinner?" And your answer is what?
I don't care.
I don't care. Because you can't make one more decision or you're going to explode. You're done. The well has run dry, baby. So. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exciting stuff to me, and I'm glad you're out there doing it. And I saw it on the report on the young man who fell, not the Dallas young man, the young man who fell in Maryland between the highways. And they listed loss of situational awareness as a cause. And for me...
It never is.
Exactly. It's a construct.
It's a symptom.
Well, yeah, what caused him to fall was either he misjudged the distance between the highways, or he didn't see it in his haste to cross the highway. Mm-hmm. But he never lost his situational awareness. He either misjudged or didn't observe something, or and you hate to explain failure with failure, or thought he could make it. Mm-hmm. He went to, who knows? Nobody saw him fall. But to say loss of situational awareness, I'm like,
There's nothing that frustrates me more in a report to read that.
Well, but it's all over the DOT reports, that even the Department of Aviation has started to use it as a cause. And the problem is, you well know, and I always say it, and it's a off of my friend Dr. Decker, if you lose situational awareness, what replaces it? Sawdust? I mean, you're always aware of something. It just might not be what's going to kill you. Mm-hmm. The great classic that I know you would always talk about in your classes, the pilots that are fixated on the landing gear button, and they fly right into the side of a mountain. Well, the altimeter might have been a little more important at that point in time. I'm just going to go out on a limb and go there. But it wasn't a loss of situational awareness. They were applying their attention in the wrong place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their attention became totally to that light on that landing gear, and that used up all their working memory.
Right.
And that was the issue, which is fascinating. And I think that, you know, people are so, well, you know, and you and I see it. When you're out there, it's like the transitional attack now. When it first came out, I got a thing from somebody who was explaining slicers, and they said, and you must always try to hit it from the outside. I'm like, okay, I grew up in New York City. That ain't gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just explain to you, Lucy, what the city looks like. You know what I mean? You ain't gonna hit it from the outside in about 80% of our buildings. So some of them, yeah. But what he was thinking about was his orientation to residential structural firefighting, where there are standalone single-family residences. Great, then say that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't, and that caused the fury. And so I worry about that. When you and I were kids, because of the Lone Ranger, we used to call it the silver bullet theory, right? You got to get a silver bullet because the Lone Ranger had one, and it can also kill vampires. So it was a double-edged sword there. You could use it for 2 occasions.
You know, I never met a firefighter yet that I've interviewed that realized they were losing their situational awareness as they were losing it. You know, as whatever was causing it, again, it's a symptom, but whatever was causing it, fixation or, you know, focus on the mission or distraction from a blinking light, whatever.
Right.
No one ever thinks they're losing their awareness of the most important things at the moment. And then something happens, you know, a near miss or catastrophe, and if they live to tell their story, then they'll say, yeah, there was a lot going on that I really wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to.
And so when you think about the fire ground and the pressure that you're under and the complexity of the fire ground, I have started recently, well, not recently, 10 years ago, but I think that's recent for the fire service. I don't agree that the first due should assume command in most instances. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule. Sometimes defensive fires, you know, you got unique circumstances. But I think the first due should just basically size things up and then tell the second due and everybody else what them and their crew are going to do to try to ameliorate the situation. And then the second due ought to say, oh, copy that, Rich. You're going to lay 1 3/4 of the front door and go in through the A side. And okay, I'm going to pull a backup line to the front door, and I'll have my crew, you know, we'll come in and support you and make sure that your water supply is good before we come in. And then maybe the first due truck company or third due ladder would say, you know, copy that. We're going to determine where the fire is and let us know when you want us to take a window so you can control the flow path or whatever, and collaborate on decision making rather than trying to force that first due officer to be this all omnipotent whiz-bang who can evaluate the fire and then tell everybody about what it's going to be looking like in 5 minutes and what they ought to do. I think that's a flawed approach. And I gave that speech at the first Blue Card Symposium, which was the last time I was ever asked to attend a Blue Card Symposium. But coincidentally, that never piss off your host, which is a lesson learned there. But I really believe that. I think that in most cases, collaborative command would do a lot more to make decision making less stressful. Because when you think about it, when I first got sick, the first phone call I made was to my best friend. It was to Ted Nee, and I called him up and said, you know, I've got prostate cancer, and he said, you know, why? I said, well, prostate cancer, and he said, oh, I'll meet you at this restaurant we used to go to, El Patio. And so he shows up and he goes, why are you looking all down in the face for? It's no big deal. You'll be fine, jackass. And that's what I needed to hear. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I didn't call my wife first because she would have freaked out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I called a guy who I knew was going to, you know, slap me around. So the first due calls the second due with, we got to fire the second floor, the second dude will say, yeah, copy that. Calm down. We're about 2 minutes out. We got a backup line for you. I'll meet you at the front door, and we'll figure this out. Then the first dude will say, okay, thanks. You know, it's supporting one another is far more important than directing one another. I think, but I could be wrong. 20 years from now, somebody will probably figure it out and say, "Oh, I was an idiot."
Well, I think those who do what you just described would strongly agree that that's a effective way to not only share the decisions but share the stress.
Yeah, more fingers on the knife. You know what I mean? We are by nature herding people. You know, we're herd animals. We want to collaborate, and we're better when we do. And I think on the fire ground, we've had this Lone Ranger thing for so many years that the first dude should be able to show up and tell everybody else what to do. There's also the flaw where, you know, I started back in the 70s, but I used to work all the time with firefighters. So you can have a fire officer with 35 years of experience like Bill Guston riding on engine 2. The guy on engine 1 has been on for 4.5 years and got promoted yesterday. Now, who do you want running that fire? Do you want that guy telling Bill Guston what to do, or do you want that guy telling Bill Guston what he wants to do with his crew, and then have Bill affirm that and support him? And that's my argument. I want firefighters to support one another, not depend on or direct one another. It's just a different way to look at it.
It's good advice. Good advice.
But not well taken by my friends who run Blue Card, which is funny because I'm the guy that invented Blue Card. I came up with the idea. I got thrown out of my own conference.
Our hour's up.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was great.
Yeah. Oh, don't be sorry. We covered a lot of ground. Holy cow! I don't know if you hear me scratching on my notepad, but I couldn't write fast enough. I'm gonna have to go back and play the episode over again to get the show notes. Thank you so much for giving me the gift of your time today.
Well, I'm sorry I got so wonky. I didn't mean to get off into the weeds there, but it's rare that I get to, you know, it's important to me, and I think that, you know, when you talk about the 3 things that are going to make us safer, I think intellectual curiosity is probably the most important when you think about it. That the atrophy of one's intellectual curiosity, you know, by trying to just survive day by day and, you know, get through the job, is probably the biggest fear I have for the fire service. And you see it, you know what I mean? I meet folks all the time. I always ask guys, what was the last book you read? And they go, I haven't read a book in years. And you try to tell them, that's a problem, son. You know, if you're not burning through 4 or 5 books a year at the minimum, you're doing yourself a disservice. And I don't mean fire books. I mean books, you know. I don't care if it's Killing Lincoln. I don't care if it's Shades of Grey. Read.
Great.
You know.
Right.
Not necessarily don't read Shades of Grey, but
no, you can watch the movie now.
Yeah, I am so old. I don't understand that at all.
I don't either.
I feel my age sometimes with stuff like that. Do you, Richie? I mean,
oh yeah. I still got 4 teenagers.
Oh, really?
They make me feel old really fast.
Yeah,
a lot.
My youngest, my 40th birthday present, my wife's 40th birthday present just turned 25, so he's our youngest. So we're way past that. But I guess that, you know, my parents probably felt the same way, you know, in the 60s with the sexual revolution and all that. They probably were scratching their head, but man, I'll tell you, whew, it's yeah. Because I would be on airplanes and you're sitting next to, you know, some lady reading that, and you'd be like, holy cow, you know, you didn't even want to talk to them. You're like, because you know, I've never read it, but I've heard that it's really out there stuff.
Yeah. I've never read any of it. I don't know if my wife has or not. If she has, maybe she hasn't told me. I don't know.
Gosh, yeah. Well, I think you'd know.
Probably. Yeah, she'd probably be telling me everything I'm doing wrong.
If your wife shows up in, I think, leather with whips and chains and handcuffs, then she's read the book.
Well, that hasn't happened yet, so
There you go. There you go.
I think I'm gonna have to do a little editing here.
Yeah, they cut that part out. Yeah.
Oh, Chief, thanks for spending some time with me.
I can't wait to see it at FDIC, Richie, and thank you for agreeing to teach for us again. We really appreciate that. And I think people should know that people like Rich teach at FDIC for free. They don't take a dime, and they do it because they really are sharing the message at that point. And it really is where the community comes together to look at what each other are doing and talk about it and have open and frank discussions and discuss nuances, and it really is fun because you got Richie sitting in one classroom talking about how the brain works and situational awareness and cognitive dissonance and inattentive blindness, and the guy in the room next to him is talking about, and you want the nozzle on the smoothbore setting as you take in the door, and it's just perfect. I mean, it's absolutely, and we need all the voices. We need them all.
Yeah.
We need them all, and they're all so important. And shame on anyone who would cast aspersions on any other firefighter for having a different opinion. Shame on them.
My best advice for anybody attending FDIC is, I got two pieces of advice. One, pre-sleep, because it's a week that you're not going to get a whole lot of rest, because not only are there activities morning, noon, and evening, but your mind will be spinning so much from the things that you're learning that you're not going to sleep well. Pre-sleep. Second piece of advice, come with an open mind. No matter what you believe in the world, no matter what you believe about firefighting and how convicted you are to those beliefs, attend your classes with an open mind and let in a new way of thinking that might be completely different from what you're used to and completely different from your comfort. But if you shut down, you're going to stop listening, and you're going to miss the opportunity to leave there smarter, which is what you go there for.
You're exactly right. And when you're there, if you have a concern with what's said or what you hear, there's your opportunity to respectfully and politely inquire of the source what it is exactly they mean. And you may find out that it's radically different than what you thought they said. The great poet Paul Simon once said, "A man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest," which is really sage advice from an old hippie rock and roller. We really, just because you think that's what they've said or meant, may not be when you scratch a little deeper. In this age of bullet points and sound bites, and oftentimes things get taken out of context, and also there's also humor, and sometimes things are said in humor or jest that outside of that setting people misinterpret. So really come and you can ask. You're going to have Steve Kerber sitting in a classroom listening to Ray McCormick talk about extinguishment, and you're going to have Ray McCormick sitting in the classroom listening to Steve Kerber talk about flow paths. And those two guys agree on 99.9% of everything the other one says. And they respect each other to no bounds, and they absolutely love one another, literally love one another. They both sit on my advisory board, and you couldn't slide a piece of paper between them. But there are people who are trying to create reputations for themselves by pretending that there's some kind of schism between Ray and Stephen, and nothing could be further from the truth. They both approach the problem from a slightly different orientation, and they both express their concerns to a slightly different perspective, and that is so healthy. We need that, and so you can sit there with those two guys and talk about everything from flow paths to stairwell operations to top floor fires, and just have an absolute blast.
Thank you.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you so much for having me on. What an honor. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Chief Halton, for sharing your powerful insight with the listeners over the last two episodes. I was very inspired by your vision of seeing the importance of sense-making and local rationality and why decisions make sense, and decision fatigue and task fixation, and SA is a symptom, not a core issue, and the need to develop our intellectual curiosity. I was so inspired by that because that's the message that I'm carrying in my situational awareness programs, and I appreciate your support and validation of that. Before we close this episode, I want to take a moment to thank the recent program hosts. Their efforts to bring the situational awareness message to their region is greatly appreciated. Loveland Fire and Rescue Authority for hosting 2 programs, sponsored by Midwest Fire, the same company that sponsors the radio show. Thanks to Midwest Fire for your commitment to not only building great fire trucks, but your avid support of firefighter safety. It's very appreciated. If you're interested in attending an upcoming SA Matters tour stop, head over to samatters.com and click on the blue box on the right side of the page that says upcoming events. There are roughly 60 of them that are scheduled or pending for 2015 so far. Hope there's one near you so that we can meet up. I look forward to that. I'm working hard to recruit some new members of the SA Matters community. If you're interested in becoming a member, there are about 5,000 that are. Head over to the SA Matters website, click on the red box on the right side of the homepage that says Member. You get a 25 Best Practices report for improving first responder safety for signing up. It's short and sweet. Won't take you but maybe 10 minutes to read it. As a reminder, every episode of the show has a show notes page on the SA Matters website. The most recent episodes scroll on the front of the homepage. But for the older ones, if you want to access the show notes, links, pictures, videos, and audios when the guests provide it, just head over to samatters.com and / and put the episode number. So if you wanted to listen to like episode 21, you'd go to samatters.com / 21, and that'll take you to the show notes page. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, and I'll mention more about that in a minute. If you want to get connected with me on social media, at Rich Gasaway, or at SA Matters on Twitter. About 13,000 are connected with me there. I appreciate that. If you want to follow me on Facebook, SA Matters page on Facebook. On LinkedIn, it's at Rich Gasaway. Well, not at, it's just Rich Gasaway on LinkedIn. Thanks to the 8,000 or so that are connected with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Well, that's it. Episode 47 is complete. Thank you again to Fire Engineering Editor-in-Chief and FDIC International Education Director Chief Bobby Halton for sharing what's coming up with FDIC and your views on firefighter safety. Thank you to our sponsor, Midwest Fire. And thank you to our listeners for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I sincerely appreciate your support of the mission. If you've experienced a near miss or witnessed one and would like to be interviewed on this show, go to samatters.com, click on the Contact Us link on the right side of the page, and thank you in advance for sharing those lessons so others may live. If you like the show, please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio, search SA Matters Radio, that's SA Matters Radio, and subscribe to the podcast and leave your feedback. If you like the show, I'd really appreciate a 5-star review. I find those are very motivating, and it helps others to find the show. If you've been inspired to learn more about situational awareness, sign up to become a member. As I mentioned, it's free, and you get that 25 Best Practices report. Claim your free gift, head over to samatters.com, click on the red box on the right side of the home page. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gasaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgasaway.com.